speed.
Roger, thank you. The Byrds practically ushered in the folk movement in the mid-'60s with Mr. Tambourine Man. How did that come about? How did the idea to record that song come about?
Well, Bob Dylan's road manager, Victor Maymutis, was a friend of Jim Dixon's, who was our first manager. And Victor sent Jim a copy of Tambourine Man on an acetate, which, for people who don't know, is like a recording on one of these little, it's a fine plastic that they used to use, they still do it for recordings. And anyway, we heard it, and Dixon thought it was going to be a hit, so we practiced it, and we took turns auditioning to see who was going to sing the lead on it. And I won the audition, and we cut it. We didn't really think it was going to be a hit, but Dixon had faith in it, and he was right.
After that, you recorded a lot of other Dylan songs with the Byrds. It seems like was that because you had great respect for him as a songwriter, or was it just that Mr. Tambourine Man was a hit? Or
it was both. It was the fact that we liked his material. He was the most outstanding folk writer of the time, I think, and we had a hit with his song, so we thought it was a good material to go ahead with.
Can you remember the first time you met Bob Dylan?
Yeah, I met him in Greenwich Village around 1962. I was living in the village, and I was working with Bobby Darin and hanging out at the folk clubs around there. And I saw him at the Gaslight Club, and I went up and said hi to him. So.
What did you think of the kind of music he was playing then?
The first time I saw him play, I thought he was just a Woody Guthrie imitator. He was kind of just a kid off the street. He wasn't successful, didn't have a record deal yet. And he was doing the harmonica and the kind of a Woody Guthrie thing like Ramblin' Jack Elliott. And I thought, well, he's really good, but I had no idea that he would gain the success that he did. The little girls really liked him. I remember that.
It seems funny to think of Bob Dylan as somebody little girls really liked. You just mentioned somebody that I wanted to ask you about, Woody Guthrie. Did Woody Guthrie have any influence on you?
Not directly. It was only indirectly that I was influenced by him, by his songs. I went to the Old Town School of Folk Music, and we used to study Woody's material there. I never met the man.
What about his, were there any Woody Guthrie lyrics that had any particular, that you...
I just used to love his stuff, you know, like Pastures of Plenty and Grand Coulee Dam and all the songs.
What about Hank Williams? Did he have any effect on your
No,
song?
I was really virtually unaware of Hank Williams until I ran into Graham Parsons, who was a Hank Williams buff, and he played me a bunch of Hank Williams material.
Thinking back on it, can you think of which Byrds song was most indicative of what you guys wanted to accomplish with the group, and why?
Well, I guess maybe Turn, 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 because it was such a nice blending of folk music and rock and roll, and the words were so strong that they still stand up today.
Did, certainly the mid-'60s and the early '60s were a time of tremendous change for America, you know, and even into the later '60s. And looking back on it now, it's easy to say that. Did you, living through it at the time and being very important to what was going on, did you know how this was really changing America? Was it that big to you? Or?
It felt like there was an artistic renaissance going on at the time and a political revolution of a kind. And I remember Frank Zappa saying, there's a political revolution going on, and unless we do something to tighten it up, it's going to be a very sloppy one. And as it turned out, it was a very sloppy one. We got some good things out of it and a lot of funny things too.
Was it important to you as a musician then to try to make any sort of political statement, or were you just a musician?
I've never been led to be political myself. I've always been aware of people's problems, and but I've always gone into the with the attitude, kind of like Elvis Presley had, that my job is to be an entertainer and not a politician.
It seems, in looking back at it and thinking that perhaps, though, that musicians were more aware in the '60s of social injustice. Do you think so?
Well, I think there was a climate of that, and I think it's coming back again. I see lyrics starting to reflect social injustice now that didn't used to be there, say, 10 years ago. And I think it's a good thing that there's an outlet for that.
Do you think that music has the power to change things?
Oh, definitely. I think it's one of the strongest things around as far as motivating people to do things.
What do you think? Why do you think that last year was such a big year for musicians to start making themselves available for causes again? What do you think?
I have no idea what happened. Maybe it's just that time. The cycle has come around again to social consciousness and the realization that musicians can make a difference, and if they band together, they can make a bigger difference, which has never happened before to that extent.
It seems like a lot of the early folk songs concerned injustice to the working class. Do you think that that's apparent in anyone's music today?
I really can't think of an example offhand. I'm sure there must be some lyrics that are in that category, but I really can't think of any.
Do you see any parallels between some of the people like, the Byrds and Dylan, and people with lyrics today like Springsteen and John Cougar? Or
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think John Cougar is definitely doing something like that, and Springsteen too. It's pardon me. It's more of a toned down kind of thing than it used to be. It's not so much of a cry for social change as it is a patriotic spirit that's going on now.
Yeah, boys in blue jeans and white white T-shirts.
Yeah.
What is your fondest performing memory with the Byrds? Do you have one particular?
With the Byrds, one of the fond memories I have is a time we were opening up for the Rolling Stones, and they were late, and we were on stage, and we had to stretch it out, so we started doing their material. And they arrived and found us doing, Love is Love, Not Get Away. It was pretty funny.
How did they react?
Well, they thought it was cute. They weren't angry.
That's good. That's definitely good. Roger, how difficult do you think it would be for kids starting out today? Do you think that for kids who are trying to put together bands, do you think it's easier than it was when you guys started out, or is it more difficult?
No, it's definitely more difficult because of the volume of people involved. There were only 10 or 20 bands around in the world when we were starting out. It seemed like maybe in the top 40, and now there are hundreds of them. It's hard to keep them in perspective. It's really difficult.
Was it as much of a business when you guys started out as it is now?
It was. It was a little softer. It wasn't quite as hard-nosed as it is now. It's really pretty tough. It's got a kind of a cruelty that is uncomfortable.
Do you? Is there anyone around today that you hear a Byrds influence in?
I hear it in certain bands like REM and Green on Red and the Long Riders and Tom Petty, the Heartbreakers. And hi, Tom.
Are you a Tom Petty fan or friend?
He's a friend of mine, yeah.
Yeah.
He sent me a postcard from Japan on the last tour they were on.
Wow. It's an interesting coupling, he and Dylan.
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, me too. I'm anxious to see them out together this summer. How would you, if you could, how would you define American rock and roll? What does that mean to you?
Well, it's almost it's almost redundant because there was no such thing as rock and roll before there was America. And it's an outgrowth, it's indigenous music to America. It started with the blues and rhythm and blues, and so American rock and roll. I mean, we all know the history of it with Bill Haley and Chuck Berry and all these people. American rock and roll. The two
Thanks.
things are synonymous.
Yeah. Thanks, Roger.
Okay.